Hello, friends, and happy Saturday. I hope everyone has had a fantastic week. I hope that you are doing well and that you are happy and healthy and prosperous. And if not, well, let's just start working on that, shall we? You are, of course, watching the Libertarian Hour here on the Kevin Lee Show. I am your host, Kevin. And today we are going to be continuing and coming close to the end of our series on myths and misunderstandings within the Libertarian Party. This is a 10-part series taking a deeper dive into the 10 most critical issues facing our country and our party. Now we are on week 9, so let's do a quick recap, if we will, on all the past weeks that we've done. Week 1, we talked about immigration and our borders. This was a week where we went to dispel the misconception that libertarians believe that the United States should be a borderless country. Again, we as libertarians believe in open borders, or some may say more open borders, but you can't have open borders without borders, right? So essentially what we advocate for, to make it very quick, very brief here, is that we want a modern day Ellis Island for immigration purposes. So we need great immigration reform. The system we have in place right now is absolutely terrible, right? It's unusable, and it's unfair, and it's irresponsible, and we need to fix it. As far as everything else, we as Americans should have free movement, right? If I'm an American and I want to go somewhere for business or go somewhere for pleasure, I shouldn't have to ask permission, right? Especially when I'm coming back in, I shouldn't have to ask permission. Now, that's not to say that we can't keep ties on people who might be terrorists and things like that. If someone's a red flag, that's one thing. But when every single American gets treated the same regardless, I mean, I've known people who have absolutely no ties to any weird organization, have done absolutely nothing wrong, and they'll go on vacation somewhere, and when they come back, they'll get detained sometimes for 6, 10, or 12 hours, being interrogated about where they were at, who they visited, what they saw, going through their bags. It's absolutely ridiculous. So again, if that sounds interesting to you, please go back to week 1 and check that out. Week 2, we talked about ending the war on drugs. Now, if you are a libertarian-minded person, or a libertarian, or even just a liberty-minded person, this one's an easy one. Libertarians do not believe in drug reform. Well, some do, I suppose. Some want to make it a very progressive transition from where we're at to where we want to be. Other people, like myself, believe that we should end the war on drugs completely, flat out, 100%. Now, again, that wouldn't be necessarily done in a day. You would want to get programs in place because you are going to have issues with people being on drugs and overdosing and then those type of things. So you need support systems in place. So it wouldn't be a one-step overnight position, but it would be pretty darn quick. So what we discussed in this week, that libertarians believe that when it comes to drugs, the U.S. drug policies are wrong and that they need to change. We need to not reschedule drugs to a lower level, but just remove them completely, right? We should be putting people in jail because they're an addict. We should put people in rehab if they so desire to get better. So again, that's week 2. Go check it out. Week 3, we spoke about gun ownership. Again, this is a pretty simple black and white area when it comes to libertarianism. We believe in Second Amendment. We believe in gun ownership. We actually believe that the government has no business knowing that I have a gun, or how many guns that I have, or how many bullets I want to buy. There shouldn't be these type of restrictions, right? And this is simply because it's in the Second Amendment. We should not be hassled. Like, I don't know where it is where you live, but I live in the great state of Illinois, and where I'm at, not only do we have to basically ask permission and do background checks to buy guns, we have to get what's called a FOID card. So I have to get permission from the state to even own a gun, which is just absolutely unconstitutional in my mind. And again, we go into a deep dive about gun ownership and about the rights of citizens. So if that sounds interesting to you or you want to learn more about it, hop back to week 3. Week 4, we talked about healthcare reform. Now, this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. I used to work in healthcare for the better part of a decade. And needless to say, it's a terrible, terrible industry which needs great overhaul, not even reform, overhaul. And that deals a lot with healthcare issues in the sense of insurances interfering, the government interfering. And we talked about the current way that we're allowing interference by the government is not helping anybody. It truly isn't, even though it's designed to be. It's absolutely not helping anybody. And it's actually hindering the entire medical industry, not only simply insurance, but advancements. I don't know if you know this, but when we try to develop new treatments or techniques, they have to be approved. And these things take a long time to get done. Sometimes years, sometimes they never get approved, even though they're 100% effective, only because, person A didn't scratch person's B back hard enough. You know what I mean? Anyways, that was week 4. So hop back there if you have any more interest in learning about healthcare. Again, this is week 5. I made a mistake on the graphic here. It's actually about foreign policy. So libertarians seek a United States at peace with the world. Libertarians believe the United States relies too heavily on our military might in foreign policy. And this is absolutely 100% true. Doesn't mean we can't have a strong military. Doesn't mean we can't have the world's strongest military. But we don't need to flex our muscles every opportunity we get. In fact, many people would argue, like myself, that we've been involved in far too many conflicts, not wars, conflicts. And once in a while, they will arise, right? There will be something that we need to get involved in. It will happen, but it should be very, very rare. So again, talking about foreign policy, and there's a lot more to it than that, but if you want to go hop back into week 5, I apologize, for foreign policy, you can do that week 6. My goodness, I'm getting myself all confused here. We spoke about education. Now, this is one that I think many people, maybe you're a younger person yourself, maybe you're currently still in school, maybe you are a parent of a young child who's in school, so you can kind of relate. Or maybe you're a young adult who just recently got out of school. So libertarians advocate a free market approach when it comes to education, where parents, teachers, and students, not the government, should make their own choices on education. And again, this is kind of a messy area. It's not like a simple one-size-fits-all. It's more of an options issue, right? We believe that if we're paying all this money towards education through property taxes and general taxes, that we should have a say onto where our children go to school. We should be forced to go to the school down the street because it's the closest one to us, right? We believe these type of things. We believe in vouchers. We believe in the creation of private schools, the expansion of charter schools, and competition is the best thing. Right now, the way our system is, the way the government is, well, let's qualify it this way. I am not young, but I'm not old, but yet I am still older than the U.S. Department of Education. That should tell you something. It hasn't always been there, and it definitely shouldn't always continue to be there. We should get rid of it, and we should get rid of it quickly. Things will start fixing themselves. So, again, if you want to learn more about what we talked about on education from a libertarian perspective, please go back to week 6. Week 7, we talked about crime and justice. Libertarians believe the justice system is flawed, and our biggest problem we face is that things that should not be considered crimes are labeled just as that. And we're talking about nonviolent crimes. No one is arguing if someone is a murderer, a rapist, a kidnapper, an abuser. No one is saying that those shouldn't be crimes. But if someone simply takes something from someone, right, they should be forced to repay what they took or damage. They shouldn't be put in a jail necessarily. If someone is taking drugs or selling drugs to survive, but yet not hurting anybody in any form beyond that, they should not be going to jail, right? This is how we as libertarians view when it comes to crime and justice reform. And there are many supporting videos I use during this, so it gives a lot of great detail, a lot of good examples, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in crime reform and justice reform, please go back to week 7. You won't be sorry that you did. So over to week 8, which was last week, we talked about civil liberties. Now, this is a term that if you're younger, you may not even quite know what it means, but you should know. And that, again, is part of the failure of the education system. Libertarians believe that the equal rights of all people matter all the time, no exceptions. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. Libertarians believe that the equal rights of all people matter at all times, no exceptions. The government must treat all people fairly and equally before the law. This is something that's just not happening. I mean, I know people think it is. I know people think that, hey, they hear reports of certain groups of people. May it be a minority, may it just be a class system of poor versus rich. But people get treated differently, right? There's always 2 sets of rules. If you're a celebrity and you get a DUI, it usually gets brushed under the rug. If you're an average Joe, like you, or probably like you, or definitely me, you can go to jail, right? First offense. So it's not fair, right? And that's just a very simple example, but civil liberties tie in very much with crime and justice, but they also tie into the way that we're being treated by the government, right? There's an entire history of what the government has done in keeping certain groups of people down or keeping people separated. We have the Jim Crow laws. We have obviously the issues that we've had in the Constitution, which corrections have been made through amendments, but it takes time for these things to kind of play out. And civil liberties is very important. You need to understand what your rights are, right? there's a Bill of Rights that most people who are 20, 23, 25, 30 years old couldn't even tell me two of the things listed on there, right? So it's important that you know what your rights are. You need to know your civil liberties, and you need, and not only for yourself, but for other people, not only for the way they're getting treated, per se, but how everyone should be getting treated, and everyone should be treated equally under the law. Now we're going to get to this week. We're going to hop all the way up to week number 9. We're going to be talking about the economy. Now, I wish I had like 3 hours to talk about this, because it really would take me that long to give you example after example of good and bad of where we're currently at in our capitalistic society, and where we need to be in an actual free market. So since I do not have that much time, what I have done is I've grabbed a few short videos, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, to play, which will give it a little bit more succinct examples and definitions. So we will visit those as we're going through. So just so you're aware, we should be able to copy or cover everything that we want to cover. But indeed, I guess only time will tell, because we're already almost 13 minutes in, and this is only a 1-hour show, folks. So let's get to it. Yeah, so let's just bring up the first thing here. Right here, we're going to talk about why we do this series again, right? So this series was influenced by wanting to clear up things that are going on, right, in libertarianism. A lot of people outside of libertarianism has a particular view of libertarians, and that they're crazy, they're wackos, they're just a bunch of Republicans who want to shoot off guns and get high. And though there might be a small portion of people who actually fit that description, it's not the norm, right? Or a bunch of Democrats who just like to own guns, not the norm, right? Libertarians have very libertarian views, and this series is designed to hopefully expose a little bit of what those views are. So to do this, I actually went onto the official party page, which is lp.org, as it says right up in the top right corner. There says lp.org. If you go there, you're going to find this landing page. And actually, I'm going to blow this up even bigger so everyone can see. So right here, you want to go to where it says lp. Or you go to lp.org. This is the page you're going to find. Next, you're going to want to click right here where it says Libertarian Party. Can't miss it. It's all the way in the top left of the menu. Just click on Libertarian Party. Why? Because it's going to bring you to the next section. It's going to bring you scroll down to the third article, if you will, for you to click on, and it'll say on the issues. So you want to see it, hit that learn more button. You want to click on there, and there it's going to give you a listing of 10 different top topics we're talking about. And those are all the ones we're covering here. Again, immigration, education, healthcare, crime and justice, civil liberties, on and on, right? These are the things that they're covered. And so I took the influence of this because obviously these are areas that are near and dear to the hearts and minds of libertarians. So I figured I would start there for sharing about the issues. Again, when you do this, this week, if you click on the economy, this is actually where we're kind of getting a good amount of our information for today. Not everything, but, a good amount of it. So let's move forward. Let's define what is, the economy, right? So it's simple to get a definition. This is, I believe, from Google, which actually I don't even know why I grabbed Google, because I'm not a big fan of the Google. Google's not evil, but, sometimes their filters and their algorithms are a little, let's just say, off, okay? But here, this is a pretty black and white definition, so I think this is acceptable. It says economy. It's a noun, right? Economy. The wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services. Now, that is a lot of words to explain what an economy is, but essentially it's the economy. Go out, you get a job, you earn money, you spend money, right? It's wealth and resources of our country, say the U.S., for example, but it could be your country if you were in a different part of the world. But it speaks especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services, right? This is what allows you to get a job, to earn money, to pay your rent, to pay your mortgage, to buy food, to do fun things, to go to the movies, to go to a ball game, to buy a new car. These are all tied in, right? These are all, I do something, I earn something. I take that money, then I spend it somewhere else. And that person who was selling that product then earns money, and they take that money and then they spend it on, buying products to make their product, plus, spending their own personal money on their own needs. And this is what we call the economy. It's not really a difficult concept once you're, a young adult and you've lived in here for a couple of decades and you're you're familiar with things to work on. But imagine learning this as someone who knew nothing about it in the first place. Kind of scary, right? So when we speak of the economy as libertarians, we actually talk of the free market. Okay, so the free market is defined as an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. So this differs slightly in the definition of an economy, because as an economy is all goods and services, then wealth that is produced, and the resources that are consumed in that process. This is simply speaking of the economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition. We're going to learn a lot more about this in just a minute. The reason why this is important is because most people will, either in the U.S. or even sometimes outside the U.S., will look at us and say, well, what are they complaining about? They have capitalism. They have a free market. I don't get it. And we do have somewhat of a free market. I've seen ranges anywhere from saying we're 70% free all the way up to 80% free. I don't know if we're quite that high. And the reason being is that the U.S. government interferes all the time, not just simply with things like education or healthcare. They are involved in everything. Look at what happened when the automotive industry almost collapsed. Instead of letting it do so and letting new companies form and come about, the government took, hundreds of billions of dollars and bailed out these companies. That is a form of government interference, which is not part of a free market. As well as they'll decide that certain people will lobby using lobbyists to certain politicians to get them to vote on certain things that put things in favor of their company or their industry, right? To save them money and to make their profit margin higher. And because of this, there are winners and losers chosen by the government. You may not be aware of this, but it's true. And this is part of the reason why we do not actually have a free market, because a free market would be an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition. The government can have zero influence, right? We cannot have all these regulations in place for saying that we have to do certain things for production, because it's done usually in a manner to force out competition, because other companies are too small to be able to fulfill those regulations. Therefore, they close, and the bigger companies only get bigger and they form monopolies. So that being said, we are going to jump over now to a quick video. It's going to explain a little bit more about what we just talked about in terms that hopefully everyone here can understand. So it's a few minutes long, so please watch, please enjoy, and let me get this off the screen so everyone can see. All right.
When a lot of people think about markets, what they have in mind are multinational corporations, enormous investment banks, Wall Street, these institutions that shuffle huge sums of money around the world. And those things are certainly part of markets, and they emerge on top of markets. But when libertarians talk about markets, when we say we defend free markets, we have something far simpler in mind. So if you have a society where people are free, where they have the freedom to make their own choices about their own lives, and you have a system of property rights, so I can be sure that what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, then we can encourage exchange. And exchange is when I see that you've got something that I would like, and I've got something that you would like, and we say, you know what, I think both of us would be better off if we swapped these. We can contrast this with the other ways that I could go about getting something that you have that I would like, which would be I could steal it from you. I could get someone else to steal it from you. I could defraud you by saying, look, I'm going to give you this thing that is super valuable, but it's really not, and get the thing from you. But in a market exchange, in a free, uncoerced exchange, we both go into it knowing what we're going to get, and we both come out of it happier than we were before. And that's what libertarians mean by markets, is that simple act of exchange that when aggregated over and over again forms the basis of the economy, forms the system that makes us all so much wealthier, so much happier, so much healthier. And so it's that simple act of exchange, uncoerced, and multiplied over and over again, that libertarians mean by markets.
Okay, so there you go. That was just a little taste of what it means. Again, when we speak of free markets as a libertarian, right? I think that's a pretty good example. I think that gives a pretty good summary of what it is. So now we're going to get back into it. So again, according to the LP.org website, which is Libertarian Party, .org, LP.org, we're going to kind of pull some information off and go through it, slide by slide. Libertarians believe that all people have the right to freely offer goods and services on the market, and that free market approaches are the most effective at improving people's lives. And the gentleman in the video just now kind of touched base on what that means, right? So we create these free markets because I have certain things that you might want, you have certain things that I might want, and we figure a way to trade. Now, you can literally trade straight up, item for item. You can trade for money. However it works between you two, however you agrees, however it works best for your life, right? But that's not what we have in the U.S. Unfortunately, we have what's called crony capitalism, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's absolutely essential that all people have the right to freely offer goods and services on the market. Another thing that we don't talk enough about is government interference when it comes to licensing. Do you realize how difficult it is to run a business, right? You have to get approval, sometimes on a federal level as well as a state level, and sometimes a local level. You have to do certain things and jump through hoops and get permits and business licenses and get permission if you're leasing property and all these type of things you have to do, and pay all these fees and fill out these forms and all this nonsense just to sell a product. And especially if you're doing something simple like haircuts, or maybe you're a street vendor and you're selling hot dogs. You're spending $800 in equipment, and yet you're going to spend $3,000, $5,000 getting your business set up. It's ridiculous. And this is all due to government interference and government regulations that do not need to be there. So we truly believe that all people have the right, uncoerced by the government when it comes to freely offering goods and services on the market, and that a truly free market approaches are the most effective at improving people's lives. Back in the day, and I'm going to use that term because I'm talking back in the day, far long before I was alive, maybe back in the early 1900s, even say the 1930s, 40s, 50s, you could simply sell a product and no one really cared. Maybe you had to get a license, maybe, but it was a simple little $5 transaction just so there was record keeping of it, right? And now some of you can argue that maybe the reason why things are the way they are is because we are such a litigious society and everyone's so quick to sue, which is fine for lawsuits if someone actually wrongs you, right? It makes sense. But the fact is that you produce a very hot cup of coffee. Anyone who has lived a normal life, whose brain functions normally, would understand that a cup of coffee is very hot. And if I spill it, I could hurt myself. Well, in theory, this is true. But we have such a litigious society that if someone spills it and they burn themselves and they hurt themselves, now all of a sudden not only do they win potentially millions of dollars, it now creates a bunch of hoops and things for people to have to go through and jump over just to sell that coffee. They're going to have to start producing cups that have warnings on them, and maybe even put warnings inside their coffee shop if they have a coffee shop, and so on and so forth. It's ridiculous. And this all has to do with government interference. Not just one little example, mind you, but we believe that people have the right to freely offer goods and services on the free market, a true free market. Our current economy is more of what we call crony capitalism than it is a free market. And that is responsible for the majority of problems that some try to blame on capitalism. Again, people are conflating the two because they look at the U.S. and say, well, that's capitalism. No, it's crony capitalism. Big difference. Only allows us to sell probably 60, 70% of a free market, which is better than nothing. I mean, there are countries out there where you don't have any type of free market. You don't have capitalism. You have socialism. You have communism, right? Those are not good models. Capitalism is the way to go, but true capitalism and free markets is the way to go. So just in a minute here, we're going to play a video that is going to actually talk much more about this in greater detail. But again, crony capitalism is a problem. And it's something that if you don't know enough about, I implore you to go beyond just this video, right? Go beyond just this stream and watch other material, absorb as much as you can, read definitions, read any economist who talks about the subject, because there aren't many people who agree with crony capitalism ever, because it only ever benefits a very few, and those are only the people way up on top, right? And the politicians in Washington who are getting a bunch of money in their coffers for it, right? So let's go ahead and watch that video right now, and then we'll talk about it shortly after.
Crony capitalism. What is it? Why is it so bad? To answer these questions, let's think about good old-fashioned capitalism. It is premised on the free exchange of goods or services between independent agents. Let's say I want to buy some cereal. Steve's Grocery is selling my brand for $4. Ted's Grocery has it for $5. I buy from Steve, which creates the most value for both me and him. Meanwhile, Ted now has an incentive to cut his costs so he can compete better. Replicate this kind of transaction billions of times a day, 365 days a year, and that is how our economy functions and grows, or at least how it's supposed to. Now, what about crony capitalism? Let's say it's the government that wants to buy some cereal. More specifically, the House of Representatives Committee for Cereal Acquisition is put in charge of the task. Steve still sells for $4, Ted for $5. I buy from Steve. He's the low price man. But the Committee for Cereal Acquisition buys from Ted. Why? Because Ted lobbied the committee. Because his corporate headquarters is in the chairman's district. Because he gave more campaign contributions. Because he promised a lobbying gig to an undecided committee member who plans to retire next year. That is how crony capitalism works. And it happens all throughout the government, from defense contracting to farm subsidies, clean energy programs, infrastructure spending, affordable housing, food stamps, Medicare, Obamacare, tax policy. You pretty much name it, crony capitalism is there. Capitalism is moral because it is premised on a voluntary exchange between independent parties who agree to the deal only because it creates value for everybody. Crony capitalism is immoral because one of the parties, the government, has been bought off. This creates three problems. First, it is unfair. Politicians are spending the public's money, but not for the public interest. Instead, they reward friends, supporters, or themselves. Our Constitution grants Congress the power to provide for the general welfare. Crony capitalism violates this sacred principle. Second, it is incredibly wasteful. In our cereal example, the government overpaid by going with Ted instead of Steve. That's obviously a waste of taxpayer money. In fact, it is really stealing from the taxpayer. Here's more waste. Ted had to spend money to lobby the government to get the contract, so he didn't get all that dollar out of the transaction. That's money that could have been spent making a better product or used in some other constructive way. Economists call this deadweight loss, and it can be substantial. Moreover, crony capitalism distorts the broader economy. In some industries, like healthcare, student loans, home mortgages, and aerospace, the government is one of the biggest purchasers of goods or services, so its politicized decisions can have wide-ranging and detrimental effects. An entire industry can become, in effect, a client of the government. When that happens, its goal is not to build a better mousetrap, but to keep politicians happy. How much does crony capitalism cost society per year? It is hard to say precisely, but the number reaches into the tens of billions of dollars, maybe beyond. Third, it tempts politicians to break the law. Once politicians feel free to spend the public's money for their own political purposes, they are just a hop, skip, and a jump away from doing so to line their own pockets or pump up their campaign funds, or both. So what can we do? Our first task is to recognize that government must have limits. Of course, there has to be a national authority to set the parameters for society that establishes the rules of the game and enforces them. But when we expect the government to promote an industry, tinker with some sector of the economy, help some important voter group, we create the groundwork for crony capitalism and all the bad things that come with it: favoritism, waste, theft, and other forms of corruption. America's 7th president, Andrew Jackson, had a very useful perspective on this issue. There are no necessary evils in government, he said. Its evils exist only in its abuses. If it would confine itself to equal protection and, as heaven does its rains, shower its favors alike on the high and the low, the rich and the poor, it would be an unqualified blessing. Jackson had it right. A limited government confined to equal protection can't play favorites. Limited government. If getting rid of crony capitalism is the goal, it all starts there. I'm Jake Costa, the Weekly Standard for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube.
So there you go. That's a better, more succinct description, I believe, of what crony capitalism is. And again, that's why I'm showing you these videos, because people have spent a lot of time getting these together for people like you and I, and you can go search these on your own, but I like to kind of put them all here together so we can all see them, watch them as in one place. But people like Prager University does some excellent videos when it comes to things on the economy or laws, and I always highly recommend you go check them out. But there you go. Crony capitalism is indeed a problem. And here's another example that most people really don't appreciate enough, right? How many times have you heard, or have you said, that you believe college education costs too much money? I'm sure you've heard that or said it yourself. And it's true. But why? Why does it cost so much money? Simple. For the same reason why the housing market literally, creating into this huge bubble, and these prices raised very quickly, and all of a sudden, boop, popped, right? Same thing was going on with education. People who are educators wanted more money, but how do you get more money? These kids can't afford to pay all this money without loans. So what they did is they lobbied people in Washington to create laws to not only make it easier to get loans, but actually get the federal government to give cheap loans easily and freely to anyone who essentially had a social security number and had not filed bankruptcy, right? This is all it took. So because of that boom, all that extra money, now universities can start charging more money. So it's kind of a scratch your back, scratch my back type of, again, crony capitalism. That's just one example. Again, it happened with the housing market. People want to spend more on, people in the housing market wanted houses to be more expensive. So they lobbied the government and to create and utilize the abilities they had to give easy, cheap loans to people. And they created ARM loans. They got banks to, they got the regulations lessened so they could loosen the belts on the banks to give out money more freely. And because of all this, this is what happened. We had the housing market bubble blow up back in 2008, 2009, and now we're getting closer and closer to the, if you will, the education bubble going pop soon. And to be honest with you, I can't believe it's going to be more than a couple more years, right? So, time to move on now from that. But here we go. We're going to talk more about the free market. When it is allowed to do so, the free market provides tremendous opportunity for people of all backgrounds, interests, and abilities. And this is really what you want. If you truly want everyone to have a level playing ground, if you want everybody to have a chance to make it in this country, you can only ever support and fight for free markets. You want to abolish the type of capitalism we have in the United States, abolish crony capitalism, and indeed, you want to promote free markets, because this is the only economic system that actually provides opportunity for people of all backgrounds, interests, and abilities, because it removes the government from playing. Just like in that video we just watched, where it talked about the two different cereal makers or sellers, right? One was selling it for $4, one was selling it for $5. The person who was selling it for $4 makes more money because they sell more product, right? But when the government interferes, either A, they don't allow that to happen because they put regulations on minimal prices you can charge and things like that, or the government will simply just buy from the more expensive source and do so because it is a quid pro quo scenario where, money's being given from the lobbyists to the campaigns. So then the politicians, plus politicians might be promised a job after the fact. All these type of things happen. It happens all the time, especially when we had the clean energy movement under Obama. I believe, what was it? I don't want to put a number on it because I don't remember, but it was a number of his former officials, advisors, and cabinet members, after some of those deals were signed and inked, after either their term ran up or they just decided to step down, all of a sudden they magically fell into these jobs that they were never qualified for, that they had no business being part of, because they had no information to give, no experience, no education in the area, right? So these people landed in these very lofty, well-paying jobs, some of them getting paid, millions of dollars a year to do a job they're not qualified for, because this is the deal that they made before they voted on something to get something done, right? This happens all the time. But a free market, when it is allowed to do so, provides tremendous opportunity to people of all backgrounds, people who do have good capital and things to invest, but also people like me who don't. But I cannot start a business without having to pay literally thousands of dollars. Even say I want to do something virtual, right? I just want to make graphics. That's all I want to do. Make some simple graphics, sell them on whatever site I want to sell them on. To cover my butt, I need to incorporate, right? But where I live, that process can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months and literally cost me well over $1,000. And that's if I do it on the cheap, right? Just so I can do something that I can normally do right now for, right now and today and start selling. I can create a website, go out there, promote it, tell people about it, and start selling. But if I do that, then I'm in trouble because I don't have a business license. I'm not incorporated. So these are the things that the government is getting involved in that they shouldn't have, especially with hair cutters, right? So say hair cutters, hairdressers, people who cut hair, stylists, if you will, probably the term they prefer. I apologize. But they've been in the news a lot lately, ever since COVID-19 hit, right? Because most of these people are independent contractors, which many people do not understand. So if you go to a nationwide chain, right? Sometimes, depending upon them, on the chain, you might be employed by the actual, salon. But in most cases, you're actually renting space. That's how it works. So you're an independent contractor. Excuse me. Need a drink of water. You are an independent contractor inside that salon. That's how it works. So, you're essentially your own company and someone else is just paying you, or not even paying you. Sometimes you're renting the space, means you're paying them. So you're not making a penny off that salon. You're only making money off of that chair and that fact that you're there and allowed to cut. But even then, you have to jump through hoops to get to that point. And with the whole COVID-19, we had everyone in that industry shut down. So all those people had no money. Now, if they wanted to try to cut hair on their own, they were going to get in lots of trouble, weren't they? We saw that again and again and again. And that's just one example of the government interference that it doesn't have a right to interfere in. And this is something that we need to not lessen. This is not something we need to improve on. This is something we literally need to eliminate. The government should not be in the business. Now, let's say we did that. How are we going to do that? We can't simply have a bunch of people who decide to do a business but have no training, no accreditation, right? Well, that's right. We can allow that to still happen, but take the government out of it. How do we do this? By having professional organizations have their own accreditation, right? This is already done in education to some extent, but we could do this across the board. You can do this in healthcare. You can do this in home care. You can do this in manufacturing. You can do this in anything really for that matter. You can do it with the hairdressers. They can have their own associations, and you can have multiple associations. It's just that some associations might be regarded higher than others. Same thing. Same thing with mechanics right now. There's SAE certified, but there's also other, certifications out there that people aren't aware of, but they're still certified, right? So this is already done on certain levels, and we need to continue to expand this and get the government out of it. Have organizations themselves be the ones who regulate themselves. It's really, truly not that difficult of a concept, and something that I think we can all get behind, if I'm honest, right? Crony capitalism, however, benefits the wealthy, the powerful, and the special interests. I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but we're going to, because you truly need to understand that when you hear about all these problems going on in the country, it's because of crony capitalism. It's about the way it's set up only helps those who are already on top, right? Those who have already made the deals, they've cut the deals, they have the permission to do what they want when they want by, with the blessing of the government. But yet people like you and I, or even a group of us who come together to try to form a company to compete against a big company, stand no chance, because that company is allowed to charge more for their product and still sell it because, say, the U.S. government is buying it. Perfect example. Back in the day, when Bill Clinton was president. Now, you might be old enough to remember that, and you may not. But Al Gore went on, I think it was Al Gore, went on a late night talk show to talk about government waste. And he made some good points. They literally, this is back when you could actually still smoke inside buildings. There was things called ashtrays, usually made out of glass, sometimes decorative. Anyways, the White House had ashtrays in it. And actually ones throughout the entire, U.S. Capitol and certain buildings you were allowed to smoke, and they had to use these government-approved ashtrays. Well, they had an entire system set up for testing ashtrays because it's important if they're made out of glass, well, glass can fall and break. So we have to make sure that it breaks in a good manner. So they spent literally millions and millions of dollars and did a bunch of testing and did a series of tests because they had a number of ashtrays and that kept getting limited down and down and down to the point where they were finally happy with one product. And it took like, I don't know, there was like 6 months or a year to even test all this and spend millions and millions of dollars to buy these ashtrays, which ended up costing the US government like hundreds of dollars a piece because of everything that was put into, picking them, right? Getting them manufactured. Instead of just going out and buying glass ashtrays. Because, if you, God forbid, you actually had a glass ashtray that fell on the ground and broke, you sweep it up and you're done with it. That's all they had to do. But yet they literally wasted time and money. And this is just one tiny example. Like, I think he even went in there and talked about toilet seats and all the rigors they had to jump through to decide on picking toilet seats and how much money that cost the taxpayer. And all this stuff ended up costing literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And that was back in the day, again, it's a theme here, when hundreds of millions of dollars was a lot of money. Right now people look at billions and be like, it's just 20 billion, 250 billion. What's the big deal, right? I think we truly and utterly need to start getting out of that mindset, if you know what I mean. Crony capitalism benefits the wealthy. It doesn't benefit you. It benefits the powerful. It benefits those who have money or those who are in power on either a federal level or a state level, right? And it benefits special interests. I mean, there's an entire industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars where it's a bunch of middlemen who we call lobbyists who try to befriend certain politicians and then get hired by companies to try to influence those people within certain regulations, right? If I were to tell you that, you'd be like, well, that sounds terrible. That's not right. That's absolutely wrong. Well, it happens all the time. In fact, there's an old meme that went around. Should have grabbed a picture of it. Didn't think about it till just now. But someone had decided to take a NASCAR jacket and put patches on it of what companies someone was basically being paid for or paid by in their campaign coffers by through lobbyists. And it was actually a rather amusing picture, but really we should have that. I mean, truly we should, that's almost the level that we're at. Like, we need to know who's influencing these elected officials, right? We need to do that. We need to be on top of it because it's out of control, and it's been out of control, but now they've learned to hide it better. So now we have to work even harder to expose it. And that's exactly what we need to do, because capitalism should not strictly benefit the wealthy and the powerful and the special interest groups, right, who know how to influence the policymakers. It's not right. It's absolutely not right. And it's something that can change, but it's something that you and I need to do to get that change. So we're going to be going into our last video. This is a very short video. It's only a couple minutes long, but we're going to hop over to it right now, and then we'll talk about it right afterwards.
Wall Street occupiers complain that corporate power is out of control in America. They say corporations are in bed with the federal government. America suffers from rampant runaway corporatism and crony capitalism. So, how can we fix this problem? How can we make the economic playing field more fair? Well, it's tempting to think there's an easy solution. All we need to do is increase the government's power to control and police corporations and the economy. The thinking is that government, unlike corporations, is accountable to the people. But that solution might be the very thing causing the problem. When you give government the power to pick winners and losers in the economy, the rich and well-connected will be the winners. Here are 2 reasons why. First, the power to regulate the economy is the same thing as the power to distribute favors. This is because when government agencies have the power to regulate industries, grant subsidies, or otherwise control the rules of the economic game, their decisions have huge financial repercussions on the groups involved. So corporations have a massive incentive to try to influence how that power gets used. The more the corporation has at stake, the more it will spend to gain control through lobbying, campaign contributions, political appointments, and other means. Pick any sector: finance, agriculture, healthcare, automotive manufacturing, or countless others. You can bet that the regulations currently in place were influenced by, sometimes even partially written by, one or more of the corporations they regulate. Second, regulations hurt small businesses more than they hurt big businesses. So more regulations means we end up with more big businesses. And this isn't just because of the lobbying big businesses do. Simply reading and understanding the regulations that apply to your industry, let alone completing the complicated paperwork, reports, new equipment purchases, and infrastructure updates, takes a lot of staff time and money. Large, established companies can more easily hire staff to focus solely on compliance and pay for necessary upgrades and other costs, while many small businesses can't afford to do any of these things, meaning they have to close, they limit expansion, or they never start up in the first place. The Small Business Administration, a government agency, estimates that it costs a small business with 20 or fewer employees around 40% more to comply with government regulations than it costs a large company with 500 or more employees. So, extensive government regulation, by its very nature, encourages the success of larger and larger companies, while hurting existing small businesses and discouraging the start of new ones. These are just a couple of the ways in which the current collusion between corporations and government is a result of government power. It may seem paradoxical, but if we reduce government power over the economy, then corporations will have less power to compete for, fewer privileges to seek, fewer subsidies to enjoy, and no agencies to capture. There will be a more level playing field for large and small firms alike. Cronyism and corporatism are like runaway fires. In important ways, government power over the market just throws more fuel on the fire. If we want to kill the fire, we need to cut the fuel. Still have questions? Try clicking on one of our other.
There you go. So that kind of answers a few more questions, but I want to bring something else up here that most people don't want to talk about, but we need to, right? And again, this ties right in about the economy. A lot of people love to talk about minimum wage, right? And again, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I am, so there we go. The reason why it's important to talk about minimum wage is because most people don't realize it's the big companies who are actually pushing for it. Did you know that? There are lobbyists who are tied to companies like Walmart and even McDonald's that are trying to push. Well, at least I've heard McDonald's. I'm not sure if that's true, but I've heard that. But big companies like Amazon, Walmart, who are trying to push for the $15 an hour minimum wage. You know why? They can afford it. Now, yes, it will hurt their bottom line. They will make less money in the short term. But what it will do is it'll cause most of the competition to disappear. And then at that point, they're practically a monopoly. And they didn't do anything wrong to deserve it, did they? They didn't do anything wrong. All the government did is raise minimum wage, and people should be willing to pay that if they want their workers to work, right? And another thing about minimum wage, a lot of people will talk about that minimum wage it's fair to produce a livable wage for a minimum wage. And an argument can be had, and a debate can definitely be held on that subject. But if you want to go there, look at some of the more Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, a couple other countries out in that area. They don't have minimum wage, yet their workers typically get paid more than Americans for minimum payments. Why? Because free markets. They have much closer to a free market system out there than we do. And because of that, the market demands that people get paid more, and the way that works is it's basically a system of give and take, right? Competition happens because you want to get the best employees. To get the best employees, you have to be willing to pay them more. It's not a difficult concept, right? And it wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen in a reasonable amount of time. And it's something we need to start working towards. Next, we're going to kind of jump towards the end here. We're already at 50 minutes, so we're going to kind of start closing this up and summarizing everything. So it says, Libertarians default towards freedom in all things, including economics. When people are allowed to run their businesses the way they see fit without inappropriate government interference and meddling, those businesses are able to innovate and create tremendous value for consumers and more jobs for employees. Amen. And again, this has to do with taxes as much as it has to do with government interference outside of taxes, right? From regular regulations. Libertarians believe that the only proper role of government in the economic realm is to protect property rights. Now, that's something we're going to dig more deep into in the coming weeks, because it's a term that a lot of libertarians use, but unfortunately, most people don't know what it means. And unfortunately, most libertarians don't bother to flesh it out for everyone around them. So I'm going to do that for you in a couple of weeks, or or maybe even a few weeks. We'll see. In the next coming weeks, we'll put it that way. But again, libertarians believe that the only proper role of government in an economic realm is to protect property rights, educate disputes, and provide a legal framework in which voluntary trade is protected. This is through court systems. This is through the police. This is when, people aren't able to steal certain things. And if they do, you can sue them. This is the reason why the EPA is such a big deal, and not in a good way, because you can have regulations, but all it does is hurt anyone else from creating businesses and creating competition. But if you allow people to create businesses and create competitions, it's going to force each other to raise their level of game, right? And what's going to occur is everyone's like, well, what about the people spilling, waste into rivers and stuff like that? Well, now you'd actually be able to sue them. Do you understand that, like, right now, currently, that's not really capable? Only the government can prosecute them, not you. But if we open up to a true free market, we could actually sue companies for doing bad things. We could actually sue Monsanto and actually shut them down and force them to either change their ways or get out of the business. Right now, we can't do that because they're protected by the U.S. government. Did you know that? It's true. It's very true. Unfortunately, the vast majority of regulations on the books do not do that. What do they do not do? They do not protect property rights. They don't protect you and I or even business owners. And that's something else I wanted to talk about. They did talk about the SBA, which is a small business association. Most people do not realize that small businesses employ more people than anybody else by far. 70% of all employees that are working in the private sector work for a small business. Most people don't realize that. Small businesses actually also produce 50% of the GDP. Most people don't realize that either. And again, the vast majority of regulations that we currently have on the books do not protect our property rights. These regulations are heavy burdens on businesses and people who are just trying to make a living, and often prevent new businesses from starting. And that's key, right? Because if there are no new businesses that can compete and grow, then whoever's been in power, so to speak, when it comes to manufacturing or providing a service of any sort, is going to continue to be, because they cannot be competed against because of the way the government is interfering, right? They also prevent the existing businesses from hiring new employees because they overtax them or have certain regulations about how many employees they can have, or if they have a certain amount of employees, they have to offer certain benefits, and then that's going to put them out of the market and it'll cause them to lose money. So instead of expanding, they'll just stay where they're at, sort of thing. This happens all the time. It even forces these businesses to close. People don't realize sometimes it just costs too much money to run a business, not because the product's too much or what have you, but there are so many regulations put into an industry that for someone to actually attempt to have a business, it just becomes unprofitable. They'll actually lose more money than they will make, just paying for simple things that have no need to even be there in the first place. This is how the government interferes when it shouldn't. This violates the rights of people to engage in peaceful and honest trade. Again, this is a prime belief when it comes to libertarians and libertarianism, right? This violation of rights of people to engage in peaceful and honest trade it's blasphemy, if you will, right? People should have the right to engage freely with each other in voluntary trade, right? And to be peaceful and to make honest money. But we're being restricted by what the government does. Additionally, it actively hurts people by stifling human energy, innovation, and well-being. Again, that would take too long to unpack, but I think you can kind of figure out what that means from the examples that we've given you. Violating the rights of people to engage in peaceful, honest means they have to do different things to achieve. They have to do whatever they need to do it, and it breaks their spirit. It can hurt them physically. It actually stops people from innovating. Perfect example. My grandfather used to own a company, right? But for him to upgrade his company at the time when at a certain range would have cost him so much money and took in every spare penny he had. He just decided to sell his business and walk away instead, right? And that's the type of influence the government can and will have because of lobbyists, because of regulations, because of politicians and policymakers. Libertarians believe that taxes have the same effect as overreaching regulations and are a confiscation of the property of other people. Now, if you know anything about libertarians, you know this to be true. Many people will say taxation is theft. Other people will say taxation is extortion. They're both true, right? But libertarians believe that taxes have the same effect as overreaching regulations and are confiscation of the property of other people. Imagine if these people, especially the small business owners, mind you, 70% of all people are employed by small business owners who don't have enough money to invest back in their company or to innovate their product. But if they weren't paying all these taxes, imagine what they could do. They could hire more employees. They could pay their employees more. They could try to create a better product. They could expand their business. But they can't because they're giving all this money away towards taxes. And the only people who are getting these quote unquote tax breaks are the super wealthy, are the ones on the very top, are the Amazons, are the Microsofts, are the fill in the blank here, right? Are the Walmarts. It's not the people who are your, not just mom and pop shops, but you can be a business with 150 employees. You're still a small business and you're not getting the deals and the breaks that all the bigwigs are. Libertarians advocate reducing and eliminating taxes whenever possible to free people and businesses to do what they do best, so that everyone can have a chance to succeed, just like I was saying, right? It doesn't, in a perfect world, we could eliminate taxes. That's not going to happen probably in my lifetime, but we can sure as heck reduce a lot of them. We can cut waste. We can cut poor programs that are not functioning well. We can cut spending on areas where we know we don't need to spend it. I mean, I don't know if you've ever known this, but most governments, entities work very much like a business. So if you have a budget, say for fiscal year 2020, and you're getting close to the end of your fiscal year and you didn't use 15% or 20% of your budget, you're going to go and spend that money as fast as you can. Why? Because next year they'll look at you and say, well, you didn't need that much money. So now you're not going to get that in your budget. You were going to cut your budget by 20% because you didn't need it last year. So you won't need it this year. See how it works? That's part of the problem. That's actually also another example of not only bad management, but the way crony capitalism affects everyday life, both in the private sector as well as the public sector. So in summary, libertarians advocate removing unproductive regulation, reducing and limiting taxes, and getting government out of the way of innovation and job creation, right? We advocate for removing anything that doesn't work or works poorly, then you fix it. You don't just keep letting it going that way because, well, that's the way we've always done it. How many times have you heard people say, well, that's just the way it is? You know, no one can dream of a world where taxes don't exist, or at least not to the level that they're at. People can't dream or believe or think of a world where people don't have certain safety nets like Social Security. God forbid we actually take that money and invest it ourselves in our own retirements. You know what I mean? So in summary, libertarians advocate removing unproductive regulation, reducing and eliminating taxes, and getting government out of the way of innovation and job creation. So guys, that puts us right at an hour. We're got to get out of here. But before we leave, I do want to touch really quickly that I have other podcasts if you are not aware. So they're all part of the Kevin Lee Show. That's what this one is as well. One of them is called the Daily Dirty 30. It's a show I do every Monday through Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and it runs for about a half an hour. But again, it's an every night of the week show. We talk mostly about headlines and things in the news and things happening in the world. But sometimes I just talk, just to talk. And actually, here's an example of a video. Like literally, it'll probably still even be in the App Store. You'll probably search for it, at least for TikTok or whatever, and it'll be there. But when you go to download it, either probably won't have a button or it won't allow you to do it. It'll say like, this is not allowed in your country or your region. They do stuff like that, which is actually really weird. YouTube does the same thing. I've actually had notifications, not recently, but just in the past, where it says like, you cannot view this video in your country, or something I posted can't be displayed in another country. And I don't quite get it. I ain't gonna lie. I don't get it. All right, moving on. People who already have the apps, like I said, on their phones will be able to keep using TikTok, but not able to download updates, while WeChat will effectively be shut down as of Sunday. So apparently, if you use WeChat, if you rely on WeChat, then be prepared that unless something happens between now and Sunday, you will no longer be able to use it. And again, I don't understand exactly why Donald Trump is acting this way. I don't know if he's trying to be tough. I don't know if he's trying to give a different image of himself, but I don't think this is going to help himself with people who are either immigrants or the youth, to be honest with you. Okay, so that's just a little taste. And then we have another podcast called Whatever with Kevin, which literally says times vary because we do it sporadically. Sometimes I do a podcast once a week, sometimes once every 6 months. It just depends. Whenever I feel moved, get some old friends on there, have a few drinks, talk, have a good time. It's literally a blast. So check it out if you get a chance. And of course, always go to our website. That's thekevinleeshow.com. That's thekevinleeshow.com. On there, you'll be able to get all the information about all these podcasts, connect to live streams, both audio and video. There's ways for you to support, merch to purchase. If you want to learn more about who we are on the show, or just contact us, the links are right there. As well as you can follow us on any social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, so on and so forth. So there you go, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed the episode. And again, we only have one more week. And after that, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of new things, a bunch of like one-parters, 2-part series, talking to people, interviewing small business owners, getting to learn what it actually means to get the nuts and bolts of being involved in business in the United States in 2020. So with all that said, I hope you guys have a great day. Have a great rest of your weekend, and hopefully we'll see you during the week on the Daily Dirty 30. And if not for any reason, we'll see you next Saturday right here on the Libertarian Hour. All right? See you then.